So about a week ago, I got a chance to check out the Alienware AW3418DW ultra-wide monitor and spend a little bit of time gaming and also video editing on it. If you missed that video, you can check that out in the top right hand corner, but overall this monitor just blew me away with how premium it felt, and also that 120Hz refresh rate, which felt super smooth and also was an absolute dream to game on. I did make some quick comparisons to my current monitor that I'm using, which is the Acer X34 Predator, and basically said that when it came down to the bottom line, I would actually prefer the Alienware 3418DW. Today though, we're going to take a closer look and compare each spec and also my personal experience between both of them. I know there's a lot of you who are considering getting into the ultra-wide monitor space and are wondering which one you should get, or perhaps whether you should wait a little bit longer until Asus and Acer release their 35-inch ultra-wides next year, which feature a 200Hz refresh rate at 3440 by 1440 resolution and also HDR. Also, I know a lot of you would be considering Asus's PG348Q, but a lot of what I'm saying today about the Acer X34 Predator also applies to the PG348Q, since they both have the same LG display panel. Before we dive into the specs though, let's first talk about the price, as this may be the main deciding factor for a lot of you. Currently you can pick up the Acer X34 Predator for about $1,000 US. The PG348Q comes in at just under $1,200, and the Alienware 3418DW is the priciest of the bunch, coming in at just under $1,500, but is on sale for $1,149. So right off the bat, if you were planning on getting the PG348Q for $1,200, you should just completely disregard that and buy the Alienware instead. You're getting a much better display, and also for $50 less, it's pretty much a no-brainer. The real conversation though is whether you should get the Alienware over the X34 Predator for an extra $150 US, and hopefully I should have an answer for you guys at the end. First on the list is design, and I'm not sure about you guys, but this is a huge one for me, as the monitor really is the centerpiece and the main attraction of your desk setup. I'm personally drawn to cleaner, more minimal design principles compared to a ton of RGB or colored branding. Bezels are a huge one as well, with the Alienware taking the win here, being significantly thinner all around, and more importantly, the chin bezel is much thinner and more appealing as well. The Alienware does have a lot more bulk to it at the back, and this may be a drawback for some of you, as the X34 Predator is a bit more streamlined from this angle. Both monitors can be VESA mounted as well if that's something that you prefer. In terms of Rgb lighting, the X34 Predator has some slight ambient illumination at the bottom of the chin bezel, which is controlled through the OSD, and the Alienware 3418W also has this, but here it is touch activated, which is much more preferred. On the Alienware, you're also getting some subtle illumination on the back and also at the top right corner with the Alienware logo. Something that I've really grown to dislike about my Acer X34 Predator is this glossy black acrylic panel on the back, which is a huge attraction to fingerprints, and we all know how a few scratches can look on an acrylic surface. Not very nice. It's not a big deal for people with their monitor against their wall, but I personally have my setup in my lounge room with the back of the desk completely visible. This is much contrasted to the panels on the back of the Alienware 3418DW, which has a matte grey finish, which leaves almost no fingerprints at all and always looks clean. Overall, I think the design is fairly subjective, but personally I do prefer the look of the Alienware 3418W. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. In terms of adjustability, both monitors have height adjustment up to 130mm, with the Alienware offering a slightly higher degree of tilt and also swivel up to 20 degrees in both directions, whereas the X34 Predator does not have any. If you really want that swivel, you can check out the X34A Predator, which is a slight revision of the X34 and does offer that swivel. When it comes to I/O, both monitors are pretty much identical, with HDMI 1.4, DisplayPort 1.2, which you'll want to use if you want to make use of Nvidia's G-Sync, and also 4 USB 3.0 ports, an upstream port, and also a headphone jack. The only difference between them is that the Alienware also features an audio output to compensate for its lack of onboard speakers, whereas the X34 does have two 7-watt onboard speakers. Although if I am honest, they are pretty much useless as they sound pretty terrible. Now let's talk about that curve, and when I initially swapped the X34 Predator with the Alienware 3418DW for review, this was the first thing that I noticed. The X34 Predator is fairly conservative with a curve of 3800R, and the Alienware comes in at 1900R, so effectively twice as curved. After using both, I can say that I do prefer the more aggressive curve on the Alienware, not just for gaming but also for video editing as well, as those panels off to the edges seem a little bit closer and I found that I wasn't turning my head as much. Okay, time to talk about that display, and both the Predator and the Alienware feature an IPS panel from LG, with the Alienware of course being a more recent revision since it is a newer release. Being IPS, you are getting very nice colors from all viewing angles, and white balance is fairly consistent throughout, although I did notice some very slight shifting on the Alienware where it was a little bit cooler on the left hand side and a little warmer on the right. It's nothing too drastic though, and I doubt most of you would be able to recognize this, to be honest. Both displays feature a contrast ratio of 1000:1, a brightness of 300 nits, and a grey to grey response time of 4 milliseconds, although the actual values of your display that you buy will differ a little bit. And in terms of color depth, the Alienware features an 8-bit panel, whereas the X34 Predator is effectively a 10-bit panel via 8-bit plus dithering to achieve that. Let's be honest though, you're probably not going to buy a monitor like this for true 10-bit photo and video editing anyway. However, it may be one reason that some of you choose the Predator over the Alienware. Both displays have a fairly wide coverage of the sRGB color gamut, with the Predator coming in at 100% and the Alienware coming in at 99%. When both monitors are put up to the task though, the experience is very similar. I honestly couldn't distinguish between the 8-bit panel or the 10-bit panel, but the biggest difference for me personally was the superior anti-glare coating on the Alienware monitor. I have a lot of natural light entering the room where I sit, and the glare can be really pretty horrible at some times, almost to the point where I actually refuse to edit any footage or do anything productive. This was still evident on the Alienware display, but it was significantly less annoying than what I've experienced on the Predator, so just keep that in mind if you've got a lot of light coming into your room. Now let's talk about that annoying backlight bleed, and this is just one of those things where it heavily depends on the panel that you happen to get, as no two displays are the same in this regard. For what it's worth, my Acer X34 Predator has pretty terrible backlight bleed in the upper corners, which is very noticeable and super annoying, whereas the Alienware display had absolutely no backlight bleed at all, but instead had some significant shadowing at the top. This was really noticeable when browsing web pages and video editing, when that top taskbar is meant to be completely white, but instead has this weird shadow cast over the top of it. Overall, there does seem to be better quality control and less backlight bleed with the Alienware displays when compared to Acer and Asus. The Alienware is much superior as well when looking at the OSD and menu navigation, allowing for useful shortcuts like brightness adjust and displaying the refresh rate of the monitor in the top left hand corner. Adjusting the brightness is something that I personally do a lot since I use my PC from all hours of the day, so to easily adjust this with a couple clicks was a huge plus for me, something that I couldn't do on my X34 Predator. Okay, you've waited long enough, so let's talk about that refresh rate, which is the main reason that you're looking at these two monitors. The X34 Predator tops out at 100Hz, whereas the Alienware 3418DW tops out at 120. If you've watched my full review on the Alienware, you'll pretty much know where I stand here. From using both monitors extensively for gaming, capped at their maximum refresh rate, I can honestly report that the Alienware is noticeably smoother than the X34 Predator. I'll say it again, but the only way that I can really explain this to you guys is that the X34 Predator is almost there in terms of a buttery smooth experience, whereas the 120Hz on the Alienware leaves you not thinking about the refresh rate at all because it's so immersive and smooth. And I feel like when it really comes down to it, we can talk about the thinner bezels, the better OSD and other nuances, but the higher refresh rate on the Alienware is really what's going to pull you in its direction. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be holding out for the 35-inch 200Hz displays coming from Acer and Asus next year, probably from CES, mind you, so let's quickly talk about that. First and foremost is going to be the price, and to be honest, I really do expect these monitors to be released close to that $2,000 mark, probably around $1,700 to $1,800. Next is that refresh rate, which is going to be seriously difficult to hit with today's graphics cards, and there's no doubt that the technology to fully utilize that 200Hz refresh rate at 3440x1440 will eventually come, but it's not going to be anytime soon. And you have to ask yourself, would you rather play at 100 or 120Hz at higher ultra settings, or try to hit upwards of 200Hz at lower settings? Personally, I would prefer the former, and I do think these ultra-wide monitors are suited towards a more immersive experience where the graphics settings do play a big role. Do note as well that these new monitors will not be IPS panels, but will in fact be VA, so don't expect to be using them for color critical work, as the IPS panels from the two monitors we've looked at today are going to be much better suited for that. The bottom line is that if you are willing to shell out a decent sum of cash and the 120Hz is not enough for you, then hold on to your cash, because these 200Hz monitors are not too far away and they will not disappoint. For now though, I really don't know why you'd consider buying the Acer X34 Predator or even the Asus PG348Q when the Alienware 3418DW is currently on the market, as it really is superior in every single way that we've compared. The design is a lot cleaner, the OSD is a lot less of a headache, the bezels are thinner, the anti-glare coating is much more superior, and of course that extra 20Hz does really make a difference, especially in first-person shooters where that refresh rate is critical. So guys, let me know your thoughts down below, and if you personally own the Alienware 3418DW, or maybe if you're sticking around for those 200Hz options from Acer and Asus. Would love to chat with you guys all down in the comments, so let me know what you all think. Thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.